Hi, everyone. Welcome to Our Disabled Future, a series where disabled voices lead the way. I'm your host, Nico, and it is a good day for disability inclusion. Each day during Disability Pride Month and beyond, I'm amplifying new and real disabled stories, where we are, where we want to go, and how the heck we're going to get there. Together, I think. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Erin. Let's dive in. Hi, Erin. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Nico. Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Of course. So, Erin, tell us about yourself and about your disabled life.
Hmm. Well, I am I don't know, most people can't see my disability. Um, it's known as an invisible disability. A lot of people might refer to it as neurodivergent. Uh, but it was diagnosed as ADHD when I was 7 years old in 1983. So it's been quite a while since my diagnosis originally, and I've had several re-diagnoses since and in the recent years as well. So uh, my life growing up with ADHD was interesting because in the early 80s, it had become very popularized for young boys to be diagnosed with ADHD because of hyperactivity and things like that. Um, so when a girl was diagnosed with ADHD, that was pretty rare. In fact, I don't think I ever met another girl with ADHD at all, like in my entire childhood. If they had it, we didn't talk about it, you know. And there's varying ways that ADHD can present itself. The three main ways is there's hyperactivity. Obviously, that's the one that everybody thinks that everybody with ADHD is bouncing off the walls and causing a ruckus. There's inattentive, which I think more women have related to that diagnosis in the recent years. Although inattentive can you know can is not it's not a male or female thing. It's not male that you're hyperactive or female that you're inattentive. So I feel like that narrative a little bit needs to change because I think they're focusing a lot on, women are all inattentive, and or making it feel that way. I have combined presentation, so I get the fun of bouncing off the walls and um, you know, uh, being stuck inside my head and afraid of, what if I do this wrong, and overthinking things, and you know, um, constantly second guessing myself, procrastinating, like you name it. And at the same time, with my hyperactivity side, I struggle with emotional regulation. I struggle with talking too much, talking too fast. Sometimes in situations or interrupting situations. So that's sometimes how my ADHD will present itself. Um, so I've had a very interesting life that I've led. Lots of ups and downs in my life. Teenage years were very difficult for me, especially because I think I just had never really fit in. And I always kind of had a little arrow pointing at me because teachers would have all of their opinions to my parents about my diagnosis. So one teacher would be like, "Oh yes, we need to do A, B, and C, and we're going to implement this into Erin's, school." So I might do really well that school year. And then the next year, I would have a teacher who absolutely did not believe it, was thinking that I was completely a quote unquote bad kid, or a kid who didn't try hard enough or couldn't, behave. And so, I just never had, it was always just like on a roller coaster. So by the time I'm in my formative years, I just, kind of wanted to do what I wanted to do, which was, just not listen to everybody telling me what I am. And so, that kind of got me into some trouble a little bit as a teenager because I wanted to go out and do this, do whatever I wanted to prove myself, But I've had a great life in another sense. Like I have a beautiful daughter. She's 27. She's in grad school. You know, I'm remarried to a really wonderful man, and we've been together for almost 10 years. I've had a lot of different career changes in my life. I've primarily started working in accounting, and then the last 10 years I've been in HR. And I am a job hopper, so I represent a lot of statistics for ADHD, in the sense that I had difficulty keeping jobs. And I was also very good at getting new jobs because I could talk about myself and I could talk about all the things I could do. But normally I would get into a job and then I would become very quickly become very into the job and like trying to make, do all the things and be the best and get everything done. And pretty much within, I would say 90 days, I would burn out. So then once that burnout would start to occur, I could kind of get myself back up and get going. But over time, it would just be shorter and shorter windows where I just could not, I just procrastinated. I I could talk a good talk because I'm a talker and I'm always thinking. So, I could talk a good talk. And so a lot of people would be like, "You're doing such a great job." And I'd be like, in my mind, I'd be like, I didn't even like finish that. Like, I'm still trying to figure out like how I'm gonna do that. And they don't know that behind closed doors I'm frozen in fear and like in insecurity and like not being able to perfect this thing that I feel like everybody wants me to do, and that was the way that life was for me at work. And a lot of times emotionally it would weigh down on me because I'm trying to act like everybody else and be normal, like everybody, whatever normal is, and be like everybody else. And, but I was also kind of bossy and I was also kind of like, I was bossy to my bosses. So, I might have raised my voice at times and like have kind of had emotional offsets where they would not even see it coming, where I would just, you know, start talking about 100 things that have been bothering me for a year that they don't even remember like any of what I'm bringing up. And all of a sudden they're like, where is this? Who is this person? Where is this coming from? And that would usually either prompt me to quit or it would, or in certain scenarios, however bad it was, it might cause me to lose my job. And so that's been like a recurring theme in my life. And recently, in the last year and a half, I left a job a year ago, and I decided like to rethink a little bit about what I want to do because the workplace that exists now as it is, um, for the most part, is still very much a kind of a, everybody works 9 to 5, but really that means you work 8 to 10, and like really, you have to say yes to your boss on everything. And you have to, there's not, you have to just kind of follow the rules, the unwritten rules that they have. And I just couldn't do that. It just wasn't an environment that was, sometimes it wasn't safe for me. And honestly, like in therapy over the years, I've learned that I have some PTSD from work. That because I've been working for a long time. I've been working for about 25 years. So having job after job after job and like feeling like a failure and feeling like I let everybody down. And, it weighs on you heavily. And but my husband got diagnosed with leukemia in September of 2023. And in April of 2024, he had a bone marrow transplant, and I chose to leave my job. And I was so burnt out and so overwhelmed with everything happening in my life, like with my husband and the fear and just not knowing what's going to happen next. And then also not knowing who I am, like how can I go back to work when all I've experienced is just consistently in my mind failure, like in my mind at the time, it's failure. So I took some time, and I took the time to take care of my husband first and foremost. But during that time, I also realized, like, if I'm going to be a good caregiver, I have to really start to pay attention to myself. And getting to know who I am and getting to know my ADHD, because up until maybe a year ago, I really didn't know my ADHD. And like working with therapists, I would talk about it and I would see things that, would come up, and they would be like, oh, maybe you're just this or that, and then I would get a diagnosis again, go back to a new doctor, a new therapist, and be like, okay, again, ADHD combined again. Like it just was like this ongoing thing, and nobody was talking about it. And I think I noticed maybe a year, within the last year or two, more people talking about it online, more adults coming forward and saying, I have ADHD. I didn't know I had ADHD. No wonder like I was like struggling as a kid and went through all this stuff and have all this, depression and anxiety and all these side effects from growing up in a specific way, feeling like there's something wrong with you. And so I'm very, at this point now, I'm really all about learning about ADHD, and I'm also about taking it into the workplace. And so, I can talk about that a little bit later, but I'm, what I am trying to do is be as open as possible and share as much as possible about myself, because there's a lot of people, especially in my field, that don't have the safety net to be able to share their experience. So they need to see that other people like have an understanding of what they're going through, and that we can make workplaces uh, more accommodating for everybody, not just for the specific way that corporations and workplaces were set up. And so, I explained some of it, kind of all over the place, but
That was great. Thank you. You painted a really poignant picture of where you've been in your disability journey and how different workplaces mostly haven't supported you in that. I'm really interested to know then, what does a disability-friendly future look like for you? What do you think?
well, I can speak for myself in the sense that with neurodivergence and like with ADHD specifically, um, a lot of the things that can be have become helpful to me are so like they're so accessible to everyone, and I think that for me, finding like AI and things like that have made my life and my perfectionism and my inability to kind of organize my thoughts and like say what I want to say and build what I want to build, and has been very helpful for me. So I think in the world of disability for people with neurodivergence, I think first of all it's a change in attitude. I read an article recently, and I wrote an article on LinkedIn recently about the article that I read. And one of the things that I see commonly when they talk about ADHD people in the workplace, and I think this can expand into the world as well, is that with ADHD, they list a number of symptoms. So for the employee, right? For the employee with ADHD, you might have these symptoms, right? So as an employee, I go, yeah, I relate to that. But then comes the how does management, you know, quote unquote, you know, deal with this individual or these types of individuals? And that's where I kind of find it to be unhelpful. I feel like that we can change that dialogue because what the stigma is that we're problems to be solved. And I think that stigma can probably go for anyone with an invisible disability, like problems to be solved. You know, we're people with, you know, and we have to learn how to help them work within our boundary. And I just think for myself, and even when I started to learn how to speak up for myself in the workplace in later years, um, that hasn't changed. That attitude of like, oh, oh, you have ADHD. Oh, okay. Well, that changes things. Like, and you know, it's immediate like switch in their head of like, what kind of problems am I going to cause? Or, oh, now that thing that she did really makes like, oh, you know, she must like have problems in this area. Or, you know, it just creates sort of a storyline that we are something that needs to be solved and to be changed to fit into something else. And I reject that. I reject that highly because that isn't the case. What needs to be changed isn't the people with ADHD. What needs to be changed is how we view another human being and the way that their mind works. And I think that the for the future, my hope and my belief for the future is that if there are more voices like myself and yourself that are really speaking out loud and saying, hey, these are issues that we are continuously dealing with. We continuously tell you what we need, and yet you still make it a fearful culture for people to live in and to be accepted. And I think the louder that we can get, the more that we can talk to you know, other people and allow them to feel safe coming to us. Because let's face it, they're not going to feel safe. Like they don't feel safe right now. And I am at a point in my life now where I'm tired of pretending like I can fix myself, because I spend a lot of time, oh, I have to fix myself. I have to be like this. I can't be. What is myself? Like, I don't even know, you know? And I think that for me, the hope for the future is that the louder that our voices become, the more normal, quote unquote, normal our the more normal that these things like are in the workplace and in life, in the school, in schools, you know, allowing people just allowing people time and space to do something is not a big deal. It doesn't hurt anybody. And you know, being able to allow somebody time to prepare, a little bit more time to prepare because they need that time, that doesn't hurt anyone, and it shouldn't be a problem, but for some reason it is. So I really hope that I see, and I think I'm seeing it in a lot of workplaces, trying to really, you know, create a narrative where, hey, everybody belongs here. We need employees to be engaged in our company. How do we do that? You know, and I hope that answered your question. I again, I think I'm all over the place. So
Giving very thoughtful responses. I really value that. Thank you. You're talking about more wider acceptance in the workplace, and people sharing more of their story about neurodivergence and ADHD specifically. And that's wonderful. What specific strategies do we need to use to get to that future? Do we need to, say, pass legislation, teach a skill, or teach knowledge? What do you think?
well, sometimes I think legislation holds us back. And I really, coming from an HR perspective, the second that we get a person that comes in and says, I have a disability, right? All of a sudden, like our minds shift. We're like, oh my God, like we have to make sure that, like, you know, can we provide reasonable accommodations for these people? And like, are we doing this right? Are we, and in some cases, sadly, oh great, like this person has a disability and like now we're gonna have, and I hate to say that, but that's sometimes the tone of the conversation. And it's all because of legislation that it's like that. Um, I think that legislation is important and I'm glad that we have it because I'm glad that I have rights and that you have rights and that we deserve to be treated like any other human being on this planet. Just because we have a specific need doesn't change the fact that we are part of this world, that we are human beings here on this earth, living amongst other human beings. So I sometimes think that um, I feel like it's more of a responsibility of those of us who have disabilities to open our mouths and to start telling our stories and being raw and being vulnerable and being real and making it a wave for people who also have disabilities that are afraid to say it out loud because of the stigma, because of the shame that they might have when they have invisible disabilities, because the invisible disabilities are extremely hard for people to understand. And really all we're saying is like, can you just understand that this is how my brain works. This is how I do things. I can tell you that I'm going to get emotionally charged on things, but you know what? I also know how to talk to you about that. If you're willing to talk to me, then I'm probably going to settle down. I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to be fine. But if I can't have that conversation with you up front and say, this is what I need from you as a person who has an invisible disability, if I can't do that and educate the people in my life, then it's not going to change. It won't change because I do believe that as a person with an invisible disability, that I have a responsibility to help other people in my boat and in other boats, like my niece's who has cerebral palsy and is unable to walk. We really have a responsibility to be a voice for each other and to change the conversations. And I hope that helped answer, like, who I think, how I think, because I really do think it's time, it's our time now to be able to talk and say, this is, I'm giving my Goonies talk, it's our time down here now, it's like for us to be able to say, this is what we need, and we are going to continue to teach you what we need until you understand.
I love this sense you have of leadership as a shared responsibility, and representation as a shared responsibility as well. That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. Your answers are very well thought out. As we close our time together, Erin, I want to give you a chance that you and I, as disabled people, rarely get, and that is a chance just to brag about yourself, promote something you've done awesome recently, or maybe something you've got in progress still. If you want to sell like yourself on social media or a website, a product you got, this is your chance. Grab your pom-poms, be your own cheerleader. Let's hear it.
Uh, well, recently, I decided that I am going to go back into consulting. I've done a little bit throughout my life, here and there. But this time I've been a little bit more strategic about what I'm doing. So I'm working on building my business, which is going to be more about HR design, department design, and not necessarily the HR work itself, but more like helping startups like you know, create their HR department, start hiring employees and so forth and so on. And also to like help people utilize their technology that they have. So I want to work with small businesses to just help them with their HR foundation. A lot of companies are once it gets going, once the ball gets rolling, everything gets all over the place, and people don't have time to document. People don't have time to like to settle in and figure out ways that things need to get done. So I see myself as an HR architect, as somebody who kind of designs a blueprint, if you will, of how an HR department, for whatever industry or whatever needs to work and help. My goal is not only to help startups, but to help HR departments that have been in it. They're in the weeds. They want that foundation. They want structure. They want some things that help them, grow their department, grow their company. But they just are so inundated with so many things that they don't have time to really set aside to do that. They just respond and react, respond and react. So I'm still working on it, and but I'm excited that I have that journey. And also I am like, I have recently updated my profile as an advocate for neurodivergent individuals. I have a lot of friends with, you know, the gamut. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are autistic. I have friends who, have dyslexia. I have friends who, have OCD. I have friends who are ADHD as well. And I think the voices that have been heard for a long time are the academic and the, clinical voices, and not so much the voices of us. And so I want to be more vocal, which is why I asked if I could, participate with you, because I want to be more vocal. I want to be a voice. And I recently wrote an article. I published it on LinkedIn. Um, it's hard to get your name out there, so I'm hoping that people will read this article that I wrote. I don't remember the date that I posted it, but um, that basically tells a little bit about my story, of recent story, and about what I've gone through in my job life, and kind of what we talked about, where we need to change that narrative of us being a problem that needs to be fixed into like, how can we just all create an engaging work environment where everyone gets a piece of the pie, everyone gets in there, and that's what I want to do. That's like what I think my calling is, if you will. I think you can relate to what I'm saying as far as having a calling and wanting to be a voice. So I admire what you're doing to, spread awareness and to let us have our own voices and be able to share our experiences, because sometimes that clinical or that article written by a really good person who their intentions are to be helpful, and aren't always necessarily like helpful to us who are experiencing this life. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, is like working on that voice, working on creating my business. And, hopefully by the end of the year, I can see, end of 2025, I can see some traction and some growth, both within my business and within my advocacy.
That sounds like a remarkable goal, and it also sounds like you found the exact spot where you need to be.
Yeah,
Thank you
for
so much
sure.
for sharing your story.
Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate it. I had a nice time.
Of course, I had a great time as well. All right, folks, tune in next time. Remember, this is our disabled future, and we're building it one day at a time, together. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I'm rooting for you. I can't wait to see what you do next. Bye.